Appreciate the introduction, and we will jump right into talking about how to become information-driven. But to give you an idea of the agenda for today, we've got a little bit of insight into the audience who are on the phone today, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why you need to go beyond data-driven to information-driven, a quick snapshot of Sinequa and who we are, and then we will spend the majority of our time talking about cognitive search and analytics, and specifically as it applies to the life sciences with some demos of our product that will show how you can become information-driven. As Elizabeth said, we welcome questions, and we will have time for that at the end of the presentation. So I mentioned when you signed up for the webcast, there were some questions that were asked, and we got some really good responses to those. The first one was, are you familiar with cognitive search and analytics and those platforms and their benefits? And the vast majority of you are not. So for those of you who are familiar, you're going to have to bear with us for a few minutes as we cover some of the basics, but we will move beyond that and talk about the capabilities that these bring to life sciences as well. And then we had another fun question, which was, how does your organization extract relevant information from large volumes of data? And we got lots of answers to this question, but there were 4 in particular that I really liked. So how do you extract information from large volumes of data? Slowly, or with difficulty, or it doesn't, unfortunately. But my favorite of these 4 was, we stare at giant Excel spreadsheets for a long time. And the good news is, those of you who responded this way to this question, you're not alone. In fact, according to research by McKinsey, employees spend almost 2 hours every day, nearly 10 hours a week, just searching and gathering information necessary to do their jobs. So this is a very pervasive problem in our world, and it has only become worse as our data volumes have grown, as the pace of change has increased, as new regulations come to play. What worked 10 years or 20 years ago does not work today. So you may have not heard the term information-driven before. And so I want to talk about that briefly, and specifically why data-driven, which is a term that you probably have heard before, is not good enough. Well, it's 2 reasons. Here's an example of one reason. Warren Buffett said, I checked the actuarial tables and the lowest death rate is among 6-year-olds. So I decided to eat like a 6-year-old. That's what it means to be data-driven. He's looking just at the data, and what the data tells him, he moves forward and works with. So data by itself is not sufficient. There are other things that are needed, and we're going to talk about that. But the other reason that being data-driven isn't really a great item to aspire to is because most of the data in the world is unstructured. Most of it is in text, reports, documents, PDFs, presentations, blog posts, internet sites. There's actually a relatively small percentage of the overall data that is structured, that is numbers. So if you're data-driven, you're ignoring 80% of the information assets that are out there and available to you. So hopefully that convinces you that data-driven isn't really enough. So this is the state that we are in today as information workers. We've got all this information scattered all around in different places, different silos, different formats. You have to use different tools to go get them. And it's up to the knowledge worker to make sense of all of that. And that takes a great deal of work. So if we talk about becoming information-driven, if we have all the content of below, all the different silos, and we've got our knowledge worker up at the top, there's a pretty big gulf of getting that content to the knowledge worker in a way that he can use that information to make decisions, do his job, get insights, drive the business forward. And so there are 6 capabilities that are needed to become information-driven. And those capabilities are all represented here in this orange triangle. And the human, our knowledge worker, has to perform each of these steps for every piece of content that he wants to use. And that is what we call the cognitive burden. It's the cognitive load on the knowledge worker to do his or her job. So what we propose is that if you are able to automate and improve the capabilities along these 6 dimensions, or these 6 categories, then you can become more information driven. So the first is context. Data is useless by itself. You have to know where it came from. You have to know its quality. You have to know what it is appropriate to use it for and what it is not appropriate for. So being able to keep that content information, whether it's metadata that comes with the content itself or explicit metadata, that is important understanding to be able to use that information in an effective way to drive the business.